Yeah, this is Kate. I'm going to talk about the Global Climate Action Summit. Okay. Okay. Great.
Jag tänkte, oj. Ja, det funkar jättebra. Aha, okej. Ett, två. Good morning! God morgon! Välkomna till Hagainitiativet Seminarium. And this seminar will be in English. So I go over to English now. And welcome to all the viewers in San Francisco. And maybe in Germany and Denmark and Russia, we don't know. Everybody's very welcome. And this is a seminar we're doing together with the Global Climate Action Summit that starts tomorrow in San Francisco. So we're very happy to be one of the affiliated events in Europe. There are 3, I think 2 in Britain and 1 in Sweden. And you are the only one that's in the Nordics. So we're really happy to have this seminar. Also, I have to say we have European regulations, GDPR. So if you don't want to be filmed, you have to tell Rebecca or Victor. So I've said that. The Haga Initiative, it's a business network that works to have a vision, profitable business without climate impact. We started 8 years ago, and it's business from different sectors. All the companies have decided to be net zero until 2030 or fossil fuel free. So that is the background. And we are filming this, and you hear some maybe strange sounds, but that probably will solve later. So, and we have a fantastic group of speakers, both international speakers and Swedish and Norwegian also. So we're very happy that you are here. And of course, we like you to spread all this information on Twitter. So we have the hashtags here. It's Haga18, and you have Geekcast 2018 and Step Up 2018. If you should choose one, I would pick the one in the middle. So if you think it's too many. But please, help us to spread all the information here. So, I think I will start to introduce our first speaker. And it's Kate White, and I have to go over here. Okay. Hi, Kate. Hi. Hi, we can hear you. Welcome to Stockholm.
Thank you.
So, Kate White, Deputy Secretary, Environmental Policy and Housing Coordination at California State Transportation Agency, and you work together with Governor Brown. Yeah, and we have some pictures here, and you're probably very excited. You will start tomorrow. It's late night for you right now. So we have asked you questions, and I will help you to show the pictures. So please, Kate.
Great. Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you to the Haga Initiative for your leadership on climate action. We are very pleased to have a number of Swedish representatives joining us, delegates here in San Francisco this week at the Global Climate Action Summit. And this webinar is one of the first of many events affiliated with the summit. So the next slide, the second slide, please, is about why this year is very important, 2018. We have the next COP24 in Poland in December, where the countries will take stock of their collective climate progress, and we want to keep the pressure on the national actors. And we know that countries can do more. And we also with this summit, we are showing that it's not just about the countries, but it's also the provinces, the cities, the businesses, and civil society that are taking ambitious climate actions. So we will bring all the commitments and all the collaboration from this week to Poland and to future global climate meetings. So the next slide shows our 4 co-chairs, and we actually have 2 more co-chairs if you want to look at our website, globalclimateactionsummit.org. But our first 4 original co-chairs was, of course, our governor here in California, Jerry Brown, also Patricia Espinosa, who's executive secretary at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And then we have 2 global business leaders that are co-chairs, Anand Mahindra, who has a whole family of companies, 500 or so different companies based in India, but all over the world. And of course, Michael Bloomberg, who is a very successful businessman, as well as former mayor of New York City and now the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Climate Action. And I mentioned we also have 2 more co-chairs. We have Zhen Hua, who is a special rep from China on climate change, the most senior official on climate change from China, who has joined us as a co-chair, as well as Jayatma Wickraman Ayaki, who is the United Nations Secretary General Envoy on Youth. And it's very important to us for this whole summit to have a big focus and connections with youth, and we have a significant youth delegation that is coming to San Francisco this week. So the next slide is a little bit more about what is going to be happening over the next few days. And the idea is to make sure that everyone who is invited to the main event is coming with commitments, proof of the progress that they have made already, and then also new commitments to further reduce emissions and commit to even more ambitious actions. So you will be hearing over the next couple of days what all those commitments are, as well as on Friday, the last day of the summit, we are going to have a call to action, which will basically report on all the commitments rolled up that businesses, that cities and regions, civil society have made, and then calling on our the national actors to even be more aggressive with their reductions and to limit warming below 2 degrees Celsius. The next slide is our advisory committee. You can see we have a diverse group of advisors who have been wonderful in in advising us on the summit, including, I want to point out for this group, for the Hagainitiative, 2 business leaders, Mindy Luber with Series and Aaron Kramer with BSR, which is Business for Social Responsibility. And I know Weil is going to join you in with the Climate Action Network. Will join you soon on this webinar. On the next slide, this shows the challenge areas, and there's 5 of them. And again, you can get more detail on the summit website. But the idea is that a lot of the challenges that we're putting out for the different sectors fall into these 5 categories. Healthy energy systems is about shifting to clean energy, and we had an exciting announcement today on that from California. The governor signed a bill, and so now it is law that we will move to 100% renewable energy by 2045 in California, which is quite, this is really kind of around the corner, very soon. When you're talking about 40 million people, or by then it'll probably be 50 million people in California, because we are a growing region. It's quite ambitious, I think, and a great goal to go to 100% renewable energy by 2045. So that's a little news from today from California on number 1, healthy energy systems. Number 2 is inclusive economic growth, and this is really about making sure that as we shift to the new green economy, that we're bringing everyone along, including those who are disadvantaged, and make sure that we have lots of opportunities for economic advancement in the new economy. Third, sustainable communities. This is really focused on cities and how cities are really important central places where a lot of carbon reductions need to happen and can happen. And as the world is getting to be more and more urban, there's a big focus on cities. Number 4 is land stewardship. I know this is something near and dear to many Nordics. The Norwegians have been really helping lead our forest conservation challenges that we have, but we will be announcing over the next few days how much of the world's natural lands we need to and we commit to conserve as a international community, to make sure we have those forests, oceans, and working lands, farmlands, for future generations. And then 5th is the climate investments, and this one is really about money and where are we investing, and challenges to disinvest from old, dirty industries and really invest in the new economy. So that's how we're organizing the summit. And then the next slide is just lays out a little bit more about how this summit fits into the other global conferences and events. I mentioned those. One thing we have in New York in a couple weeks, there is a climate week, and we have a electric bus, bringing some celebrities from California across the country to New York to join them in a couple weeks. The next slide is just the kind of the run of show for the next few days. The details now are on the website of the program, so you can look at that. The next slide, affiliate events, is about, as I mentioned, this webinar is one of the first, but we will have over 350 affiliate events throughout, mostly in San Francisco this week, covering a number of topics and ability for different sectors to be able to meet in a little more intimate environments. And then finally, our path forward. This is the main messages of the summit, is to really show the urgency of the climate crisis. And we, in California, we do a regular climate assessment, and we just released that last week. That showed sea level rise and extreme weather is continuing, and we also want to. So we have a lot of scientists here, but we also want to show that again that local governments, investors, businesses, and citizens are really stepping up to take ambitious actions and make deeper commitments to each other, and make sure that we keep the pressure on the national governments as well. So with that,
thank you, Kate.
Update from San Francisco. Nina, I had attached one other document. If you want to show the first page of that.
Yeah. And this is about how the company can engage in GCAS.
Yeah, so this is, if you're wondering more specifically about how companies and businesses are, what they are doing to engage with the summit and moving forward. There's this first page here shows a series of the different challenges, and you can find out information again about each of them on the globalclimateactionsummit.org.
So, Kate, thank you very much, and congratulations to the initiative from the state of California on renewables.
Thank you.
That's really great. What are your personal hopes with the summit?
Well, I'm with the Transportation Agency, and so we will be joining the California Transportation Agency on Wednesday. We'll be announcing, so please don't say anything yet, anyone, because this is saved for Wednesday, but we will be joining a Transport Decarbonization Alliance to commit to decarbonize the transportation sector in advance of the Paris agreements, in advance of mid-century. So that's kind of an overall goal, and then so I'm very focused on the transportation parts of this.
You are a front runner in California. Do you think you will bring the other states with you? Do you think you will get more states in the United States with you?
Sorry, say it again?
Do you think you will get more people, more states with you? You are front runner in California. What about the other states? Will they follow you?
Yeah, so in California we have a big emphasis on the transport sector because that's the biggest emitter of carbon in our state. When you include fuels, it's about 50% of emissions are from the transport sector. So we have a number of initiatives to have and laws to have cleaner fuels, cleaner cars, and also more carbon-efficient travel. And that third one, the carbon-efficient travel, is what I'm very focused on. And we're frankly a little behind Sweden, probably, and many European countries. But we are building the first high-speed rail system in America connecting San Francisco and Los Angeles. And with the high-speed rail system, we are committed to powering that with 100% renewable energy.
Thank you, Kate. I think we will... sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think we need to stop here now. I know it's late and you have a busy day tomorrow.
Yes, it's late here, so I think I may go to bed.
Yeah. So, good night, Kate, and thank you very much for joining us, and good luck with the summit.
Thank you so much, Nina.
Thank you, Kate. An applause. So then we will move over to our next speaker, and that's Wael Hamiden. And he's the Executive Director of Climate Action Network. And we also saw a picture. He's in the advisory committee for the summit and the voice for the environmental organizations. And I don't know if you can hear me, Wael.
I can now.
Wow! So nice to meet you again, Wael.
Same here, Nina.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. So I know it's late for you also, and you have a busy day tomorrow. And we're so happy that you could join us. This is a big event, and we heard from Kate that we are the first seminar for the summit, one of the first affiliated seminars, so we started early. So, Wael, please, how urgent is it with climate action?
Yeah, first, thank you for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to reach the Nordic community on climate change. We are not, I'm from the Arab region, and we're not as active as you guys on climate change. So I think it's maybe the first time where an Arab person comes and tells the Nordic people what's happening on climate change and not the other way around. So the urgency, the science is clear, and I think this is not something new for everyone. The Paris Agreement talks about 1.5 to stay below 1.5. So 1.5 is the limit for survival of a lot of communities, a lot of islands, a lot of cultures, a lot of species. The coral reefs, we would lose almost 100% of the coral reef if we reach 2 degrees. And there's now an IPCC climate change report coming out 1.5 to actually provide all the evidence why we need to stay below 1.5 and actually the possibility of achieving it. We already have this research, no one is going to say, and the urgent matter of 1.5 will, at the temperature will not or end of this century, less than 10 years be able to slow it. So all the impact come in and 1.5 will be the far future relatively. The ability for us to stay below 5 will determine what we do next 5 years. Actually, if we continue the trajectory of emissions, only 6 years will all our emissions below 1.5. This is how urgent. Very fast.
Well, I think we need to take you on a telephone instead, because we get some really, bumpy.
Let me send you my local number on Skype.
Yeah, Victor is calling you right now. Whoopsie. You didn't hear very much. No, it was hard listening.
Hello? Hello. Yes, hold on 2 seconds. No. Hang up. Du får prata direkt.
Jaha. Hello, Val. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me? We can hear you.
Please let me know if you can hear me. Type something on Skype, then I can speak. Hello?
No, you can't hear me. Can you hear
Can
me?
you hear me? Can you type on Skype?
So we'll try another phone. We love technical problems. Should I have that on speaker? Yeah, Wael sent his Lebanese Skype number, so we can try that one. He has sent it here. But he probably doesn't know this is my number. That's why he's not answering. So, Wael, do you hear me? We can't hear you. Wait a sec. So, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me? Is this better?
Yes, this is perfect. And you have to speak quite slowly, not because that we are Swedes, but because of the internet.
Yes, it's a bit surprising that US and Danish link is that bad. It would have been better if I was in Lebanon, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. So, yes, I'll carry on for the sake of time. So 1.5, I don't know how much you caught of it. It's becoming very urgent to stay below 1.5. And we have less than 6 years to, if we continue in our current emissions, in 6 years, the budget to stay below 1.5 will be gone. And losing 1.5 is a loss of a lot. Communities, species, coral reefs, countries, and so on. It's not acceptable in any way. So what needs to happen in terms of emissions clearly? We need to reach a plateau, a peak, and rapidly decline by 2020. So in 2 years, emissions need to start going down fast. What does this mean? That we need immediate large increase of renewable energy investment and sharp decrease in fossil fuel investments on the ground. Now, governments are not very well prepared for that. They cannot move things fast. Governments are good for long-term planning and visioning, and the policy process, the shift in the way a government works will have impacts on a midterm level, right? Not very short term in the coming 2 years. The actions we're seeing on climate change now by governments have been planned in 2015 or 2010. That's what we're seeing now. The 2020 target of governments was agreed in Copenhagen in 2009. So we cannot expect in 2 years to have a rapid transition. That's why non-state actors, i.e. businesses, cities, local authorities, they are very important in the coming 2 years to enhance mobilization of resources very fast to be able to stick to the 1.5 target. The government still need to provide the vision and the direction and clarity for the businesses that where the future will be, where the profits will be, where the economy will be going. So yes, it will work together. Government and businesses work hand in hand. Even non-state actors, businesses and cities need to encourage government to go further, tell them that we are ready to move, but we need the right signals from you that this is where the future is. Actually, at the moment, on a global scale, the leadership is not in national governments. We see more leadership in non-state actors. They are providing the push required to move governments forward. And that is actually what the California Summit is about. The Global Climate Action Summit is a demonstration of non-state actors with the purpose, this is the objective of the summit, to move national governments. There will be a call for action coming on Friday to governments saying, we've got your back. Look, we're going. That's where we're going. And you have to come with us because that's where the profit is. That's where the world needs to be. That's where it's good for the economy, for the well-being of our societies. And we need you to move with us. Now, funny enough, in the Nordic country, it's a different situation. What we perceive as global climate community, and this might not be the situation on the ground, but I'm telling you what we perceive in a general term, that in Nordic country, we see more government leadership than we see non-state actor leadership in Nordic countries. And this is what is visible, right? Again, it's not maybe what the reality is, but we hear about government doing this and governments doing that. Very little we hear about businesses in the Nordic countries moving forward. This is an opportunity. This means that there's room for a lot of work because it's not only about action, and I'm sure Nordic companies and cities are doing a lot, but we need to hear what's happening there. The world needs to hear good news. The world needs to see things moving. Of course, there are some companies that are making a global impact. On the lead of that is IKEA. Right? We hear IKEA all the time. They're playing a big role in the global climate debate and moving things forward. There are some initiatives that are random, like from Volvo, H&M, and such companies. But for just to give you, in the IT industry, we hear more from U.S. companies than we hear from, for example, from Nokia or Ericsson. Right? And this is on a global scale. And we need everyone to move forward. Again, a lot of people listen to Nordic, around the world, Nordic voices, businesses or non-businesses, cities or national level. And what needs to happen going forward is based on the outcomes of the GCAS and the challenge is for the Nordic businesses to join the voice to push governments forward, not Nordic countries, but governments around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Weil, and thank you for challenging us. I promise you, the Swedish businesses is bigger than, they're more than IKEA and H&M. And you know, the Hagainitiativet, the companies there decided to be net zero at 2030 or fossil fuel free until 2030. So we're moving it, but as you said, we maybe not be heard all over the world. And after your speak, we will have a presentation about what Nordic companies think that how they are moving towards more ambitious climate policy. But I have to ask you, you're from Lebanon, and that's one of the countries. Is anything happening in the Arab world?
There's a lot happening in the Arab world. Again, like I was saying, to change everything, you need everyone. Everyone in every country needs to act, businesses, governments, and so on, in every region. In the Arab world, it's a special case. It is close to a Norway kind of situation in some of the countries where it's a fossil fuel economy. Norway, of course, is changing very fast, faster than the Arab region. There is still a huge dependence in GDP in some Arab countries on fossil fuels, but we already hear things we never heard before. This doesn't mean enough, but you know, directly after Paris, there were meetings in UAE, United Arab Emirates, on post-oil economy. We never heard that this discussion ever happened. We hear the discussion about how can we survive if we stay below 1.5 in terms of economies in the Arab world. Businesses are starting to be interested in what's happening, and we have some initiatives in Lebanon and Jordan, and also UAE and Qatar by businesses committing to certain actions. They also now, because of the California summit, a number of them came forward to change things. There's a lot of initiatives that I can use, but some are very simple that can do a lot. The national banks, okay, the central banks of the national banks in Arab countries, they've started to change interest rates on loans related to renewable energy, and suddenly you have booming renewable energy in some of the countries. Of course, there's still a lack of awareness. There's still a challenging security situation in the region. There's still conflicts, physical conflicts in the region that is affecting and dominating everything that's happening. We saw what's been happening between Trump, Saudi Arabia, and the whole game in Syria between Iran, Russia, and the rest of the world. So, of course, these dominate the thinking of Lebanese stakeholders, and climate change will not be soon on top of the priority because of the current immediate situation around us. But the awareness is increasing, and that's why I'm saying that international influence on the Arab region would be crucial. This is not what the governments are hearing here, or businesses from international businesses. They're not coming and saying climate change is a priority, or you know, you need to act on climate change as important as the other issues you're working with. They still come with what's obvious, which is the issues that are at hand in the region.
Thank you, Weil. We need to stop here, and we're so happy that you could join us. I know it's late at night, and you have a busy day tomorrow and the rest of the days. And so we want to give you a big applaud. I hope you could hear that.
Yeah, I can very well. Thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of the event.
And good luck, Weil. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
So now we will move on, and we will have no more technical problems. I can promise you that, I think. We heard from Wael that what is business doing, and in this spring, we made a survey financed by the Nordic Council of Ministers, and we asked 38 companies in the Nordics on their view on profitability and climate. And my colleague, Viktor Norberg, who is the coordinator for the Hagainitiativet, will present the report. So here you are.
Hello, hello. Yes, you can hear me. So, thank you, Nina. This report we published in April this year, and we used and interviewed 38 chairmen and CEOs of large Nordic export companies, and they gave their views on climate effort and profitability and competitiveness. So Nordic business on climate transition, competitiveness, and growth. Together, the CEO and chairman, they represent companies with a total of 500,000 employees and 17% in revenue of the GDP of the whole Nordic region. And the results of the report is pretty clear. Climate effort increases competitiveness. Because if you don't do the transition, no one will buy your products, no one will work for you, and no one would like to invest in your company. And this is exactly what Henrik Henriksson, CEO of Scania, said during his interview with us. So Nordic businesses see that they can contribute to the global transition by being progressive and by being a role model for the world to show that it's possible to combine climate effort and profitability. Obviously, the preconditions are pretty different from country to country. So what do the companies actually need in order to realize good business from climate effort? Well, according to the interviewees themselves, most important factors are that there are legislation and policy for business in place that are predictable and long-term, and that there are access to renewable energy. And also on the other way around, definitely then, unpredictable conditions are hampering the climate change, and similar to Donald Trump's presidency and connected to closed markets and trade barriers. So the main conclusions of the report states that there is a high priority and a high commitment of Nordic companies and their CEOs and chairmen, because they see that climate efforts give competitiveness, and they also therefore welcomes higher targets. And these conclusions were presented for the Nordic Minister of Council, as Nina previously said, which includes all the environmental ministers of all the Nordic countries. And in addition to these conclusions, we also presented 2 suggestions that we brought up together with the other Nordic networks that we conducted this report with. And it's first of all to set goals for citizens' carbon footprints, and second of all, to make all public procurement climate neutral. And you can read more, you can find the report on our homepage, and you can read more about our suggestions and how we push this forward and use this report. Yeah. Yes.
Doing this. Yes, now it works. Victor, what surprised you with the report?
Most things surprised me was the strong engagement and from the CEOs and the chairman that we actually held the interviews with. So and also that they were very keen on pushing for international organizations in taking new ambitious targets and making policy to go towards a global transition, for instance, a global carbon tax.
Should we mention a Norwegian company?
That is...
For example, so they know that...
Sorry?
So they know there are companies that we interviewed. If you mention one Norwegian company...
One Norwegian company, Storebrand, for
instance.
Company, and the Finnish company was Fortum,
and
for
Stora
instance.
Enso.
And Stora Enso.
We have Denmark.
And there we have Carlsberg, where also the chairman was joining us on our event at Grand Hotel.
And Iceland.
In Iceland we have the Orkuveikja Reykjavíkur.
Yes, very good.
Exactly.
You're the only one in the office that can pronounce that. And also in Sweden we had Folksam and some other companies. I think Preem also was in the interview. So it's 38 big companies, and we always heard it's impossible for export companies to be bold and have a tough action agenda working with climate. And we thought, we don't think that's true. We have to interview the CEOs and the chairmen. And then we did that, and suddenly the top of agenda, they said.
And I also hope Weil is listening to this and didn't go to bed yet, because this contradicts a bit what he said.
Yeah.
That it's actually business. And I think also the government in Sweden were pretty surprised about how forward the companies are in this.
And when I presented the report, we had the CEO sitting on that side, and we had the ministers of environment from the Nordic countries sitting here. And they were doing such a fantastic work, all the CEOs. They said, we want action from you politicians. And they were sitting like this. Not shitting, sitting. Sitting like this. And saying, wow. And the Swedish ministers, they were aware of this. But I think it was news for some of the others. So, and we can take the other picture. Together with our friends from the Nordic countries, we have started a call for EU, because we know we can't move business if policy isn't ambitious enough. So we have this call together with Climate Leadership Coalition and Norway 2030 and the other initiatives. And this is signed up for, I think it's around 50 companies and cities that have signed for this. And we're saying to EU, because it's important right now to set net zero, set a target for net zero emissions by 2050 or earlier, taking the IPCC findings into account. And also, based on that target, agree on a binding carbon budget for the remaining GHG emissions. And last, to revise and align the 2030 and 2040 targets with the net zero target. So that call is out right now, and you as a company or a city, wherever you are, all over the world, can sign this, because we're moving EU on this, and we will have a meeting with them soon. So that's important. We need ambitious policy if we're going to manage. Thank you, Victor, and applaud.
Thank you.
So, now we move over to our next speaker. And that's Stein Ivar Bye, our Norwegian guest. But you're here in Sweden, you're the CEO of Preem and also a member of the Hagainitiativet. And you are a company that is in a transformation right now. So please tell us.
Thank you for inviting me and participating in your exciting seminar. So yes, I would like to share with you a little bit of the plans that Preem have. So I don't know if you want to move to the slides that we have provided. And that's I'm in control of, sorry. So I wanted to start with give you a little bit of background to what is Preem about and what we do to contribute to improve the impact and priorities and plans for an exciting future that we have. And on these pictures, you can also see what is the core of our business. We are a refining, supply and distribution company, providing fuels to transportation and industry. And these are two of our manufacturing sites at the west coast of Sweden. and very well integrated, as you can see, with the local environment. Now, we know that fossil fuels is not necessarily what is, applauded in this discussion, but we take great pride in making sure that what we produce is done in a modern, environmental and energy efficient way. I think that is the first responsibility you have to take, to make sure that your own operation is the best and the state of art. And our capacity represents 80% of Swedish refinery capacity and close to 30% of the Nordic capacity. So it's quite significant what we do actually contributes. And then we do benchmark ourselves and try to measure how do we improve and how is our performance relative to the rest of the industry that we operate in. And this is from a Solomon study that is done on a biannual basis. And the last survey was done in 2016. And it proves that compared to an average refinery in Northwest Europe, the facilities of Preem have 17% less carbon dioxide emissions, 60% less nitrogen oxides, and 88% less sulfur oxides. And this also, I think, proves that we are making progress. Then I want to move a little bit to the renewables and how does that create opportunities for new value chains. And this has to be developed with scientific research and development and contribution by many companies across the value chain. If you look at the top of this chart, you see the traditional value chain in the fossil fuels. So you obviously extract the crude oil, you refine it to products that are fit for purpose, for transportation, for industry. And that's how we make the modern world work today. Then at Preem, we are also investing into the biofuels. And the point I want to make here that even if you extract raw material from biofuels, you still need to refine them in facilities like we do for the fossil fuels. So the refineries play an important role even in the future and even when we make transitions into the biofuels and renewables. So although we tend to have a bad reputation, I think society have to recognize that what we do is actually quite essential even in the future. Then I want to also talk a little bit about what are we doing. So we heard from Whale that maybe the Nordic industry is not recognized by doing actions, but at least I think in Preem we can point to projects that we have done and that we're going to do to contribute. So we already have done investment in the bio-oil valorization in Sunpine. It's an operational site. It's producing and we are expanding the capacity. We have already started the project to extract lignin. It's a JV we have with Lignoil, and that will add to our capacity. And then we are exploring other opportunities than forest and sawmill byproducts, where we use residue from forestry and industry in Sweden to make that into renewable fuels. We are also quite recently moved into a JV with Vattenfall, where we will use electricity to produce hydrogen, because hydrogen is an important factor to refine the product that we're using. So even in that area, we are making progress. So the point I want to make here, and showing all these names on the screen other than Preem, is that our solution depends on collaboration with scientists, with other companies, and obviously we need the policymakers also to contribute to make the transition happen. We talked about policies and that they need to be predictable and long-term. And here I just want to show some charts that is taken from the Sweco report, which basically shows that although Sweden and the Nordic countries are moving ahead and have very ambitious goals on the consumption side, and we are making good progress. But I would maybe put out there a challenge: how do we make it a sustainable way? Because today we are basically in Sweden relying on imports for the consumptions we make, and we have not had policies that have facilitated sufficient investments to keep pace with the consumption. And that's even more evident on the chart to the right, which is showing the amount of renewables produced from raw material in Sweden. So you can see it's only a very small part that is produced from raw material here. Actually, 85% of the renewable fuels that Sweden consumes today is imported. And some of it actually comes from cutting rainforest and producing palm oil in Asia. And I will question whether that is the right way moving forward. So I think that wraps up my introduction, just to give you a perspective on what Preem is doing and how we look at some of the challenges and how we want to move this forward.
Thank you, Stein-Ivar. At 2030, how much renewable will you have then?
So in our investment plans and some of the projects that you saw here, we currently have produced 200,000 cubes per year of renewable fuels. We are making investment to increase that by 2020 to 1.3 million, and by 2030 we expect to be at 3 million. So that's more than 10 times what we are producing today. Obviously this relies on the right policies, and it also shows the need for long term. When we make decisions to invest, it will take, I would say, between 3 to 4 years before the capacity is actually on the ground, and we rely on that predictability to make it also economical.
Right now, is it profitable for you?
We have made profitable investments, and we are quite pleased with our, call it, financial performance. So it is possible, but obviously, again, it relies on the right policies. And for example, one of the, I think, elements that result in the graphs that we saw, that sufficient investment is not taking place, is because the imported raw material from other parts of the world that maybe even is less sustainable is significantly cheaper. So if that remains, I would say it's very unlikely that investments will happen, which would be unfortunate.
We heard from Kate that they have a new decision there. They're going to be more renewables in their transport sector. Yeah. Do you think what you're doing at Preem can be copied all over the world?
I think we should be careful to say it can be, or imply that it can be copied all over the world. The way I think about it is that, first of all, you have to find several solutions and be innovative. And depending on the market and the geography that you operate in, what is the right solution for providing energy, which is a part of our job, in that particular environment. I definitely believe that producing biofuels, the way we do, is something that can be adapted. But I also think we have to look at other solutions depending on the situation in the various geographies and markets.
Yeah, there is a discussion also about if there is enough of renewables. It's a big discussion. Can you say something about that?
I think, first of all, we should be very careful, in my opinion, to focus on the word renewables. After all, what we are trying to do is to curb climate change. So that is the objective. We sometimes throw around this word renewables without actually defining what it means, and I just gave some example what in my opinion is not renewables. So for me, we have to focus on what are the actions that we can take and what are the most efficient steps to curb climate change. That's what we are after. And then you have to look at what are the right measures for that.
You are also using rest products from the renewables, and innovative things like using lignin and etc. So that probably is something that could be copied.
I think there is a lot of things that society does today where we create waste, and to look at innovative ways to take advantage of that waste and actually use it for different purposes, recycling, energy, is really something we can improve on. And there are different solutions. And obviously for what we are doing, we think that is a very innovative way of taking advantage of rest products from other industries. So that's, I think, yeah.
Being, sorry, you don't use that word, oil company. I know that's, but for a lot of people, it's quite different that a company that's been dependent on oil moving to this transition. What does it mean for the people that are employed at Preem that you're doing this transition?
So I have been employed in Preem since January this year, and for me it's very evident that the employees are very proud of working for Preem and contributing to the transition that we're trying to carry out. And that obviously creates a very positive environment and creates innovative ideas. So I think people then feel that they are not only contributing to the company, but also to society in general.
Last question. Do you feel that your customers want you to do this transition? Do you feel them flåsar er i nacken? I don't know how to say that in English.
I think customers have the, call it, intent and ambitions to participate and consume, call it, in a responsible way. But I would also say that it may be difficult for the customer, at least the consumer at the end, to actually understand the whole life cycle and the impact depending on what you buy. So even myself, it's difficult to, you see eco labels, you see all kinds of advertisements. And in the end, I think we have to provide responsible goods and price them such that consumers will select them, I would say, also out of economy. To only rely on call it, consumers making judgment on what they buy, I think will be maybe difficult to make a big difference. That's my personal view.
And the business? Do you feel the pressure from them, your company, the companies that you work with?
I would say that we have a very good relationship, and I pointed out for the project that we're doing, that people want to come together and create innovative solutions and call it share opportunities across the value chain. So yes, there is pressure, but I would call it positive pressure to see what we can do together to make a difference. That's what I would focus on.
Thank you very much, Dan Ivar, and an applaud to you. And you can put it. I hope our colleagues from the States will look at this also. Thank you very much. And now our next speaker, that's Anders Wikman, who is the co-president of the Club of Rome and also the chairman of Climate Kick. And Anders, hi. I didn't say good morning to you. Good morning.
Good morning.
What's your response to Oil and Kate?
Well, I think it's very, very important for these kind of summits or big meetings to take place because, as they said, and as we have concluded here also...
Slå på micken.
Well, you should have told me.
So here we are. Now it's on. Can you say something?
Okay. It's not on.
Wait. Just be patient. I think... So yes, say something now.
1, 2, 3, yeah. I think it's very important that we have these kind of big meetings, and in this case, non-state actors, because as they concluded, and as was mentioned also before, in the Nordic context, governments are slow, very slow in implementation. And that was already evident in Paris. We got ambitious goals, but we said very little. There was very little talk about the implementation. And after Paris, we realized also that most of the so-called 2-degree scenarios depend on large negative emissions. And I'm really stressing large. We are talking about huge volumes that are sort of understood to be part of the solution. So I agree. And I also agree with the Climate Action Network chairman that we have very few years still left to start reducing emissions the big way. And I don't think we should only talk about reducing emissions and carbon budgets. We should emphasize that we have to keep carbon in the ground. That's really what is at stake. And I just got a report yesterday that there are 2,400 new coal-powered production facilities, basically for electricity, that are in the plans until 2030.
All over the world.
All over the world. And the average size, 600 to 700 megawatts. And you know, if that happens, we are toast. So we really need to do something very quickly. And another aspect that we very rarely talk about is that welfare, standard of living, depends on access to modern energy. Poor people need modern energy, and if there is not an alternative available in the developing world, whether we talk about China or Sierra Leone or Ethiopia, if there are no alternatives to fossil fuels, they will use fossil fuels. Because that's the difference between life and death for them. So that's why we have to ramp up renewable investments by 300, 400% in the years to come. Otherwise, this will not happen. Whatever we do in the Nordic countries, we have really to focus on that. And then lastly, I was very, very much agreeing with their 5 focus areas. Energy, of course. They didn't emphasize materials specifically, but they talked about sustainable communities, and there was infrastructure part of it. Because that's also very often overlooked. We have focused so much on energy and energy systems, and in particular in the European Union. That's been the main focus for the 2020 platform or agreement. But materials make up at least 25% of carbon emissions. Steel, cement, plastics, aluminum, and I would add textiles. Textiles is a horror story. And when they refer to H&M as doing big things, I still want to see them. Because, you know, roughly 6 to 7% of carbon emissions are directly or indirectly linked to textiles. So unless we totally change the business models here, it's not going to work. What I would have liked to see maybe on that, among those 5 focus areas, would have been consumption of lifestyles, and then related to business models. Because if we are going to continue to earn revenue and consumers demanding more and more stuff, it's not going to work. We need different business models. Benefiting more for high quality services than owning stuff. And that's a big, big, big change, in my opinion. Lastly, I was a little bit taken aback when he said that we don't hear much about Nordic companies, because I have the impression that not only the Hagainitiativet, but also the initiative CLC in Finland is very proactive. But maybe why you hear much more about American companies is A, it's such a big country and such big companies, but also that what they do is such a contrast to what President Trump is doing. So it's singled out as something very, very positive. But I'm quite impressed by what you are doing.
Thank you, Anders. And I'm impressed what you are doing. And I was also surprised to hear that. And that means that we think we talk about this, you know, ourselves here in our little Ankdam in Sweden and Nordics. And maybe we don't reach out to the rest of the world. It's maybe important to do that.
But I also would like to say is that the summit will talk about transformation. And when I compare it with the debate in the recently concluded election campaign in Sweden, I just say to myself, how the hell could it be that we for 4 weeks had an election campaign where climate was discussed, but it was mostly about, you know, should we subsidize electric cycles? What should we do about the tax on aviation? It was petty issues compared to the transformation. Nobody talked about the transformation. And I don't get it, why the political system, at least when they discuss, is so much lagging behind.
Perfect. That's my next question. I just have to say, you talked about textiles. Every time on stage, I have my second-hand clothes on. So this is from the 70s. So that's a statement also. So I must say...
And I'm doing this all the time,
yes,
with everything that I have to mend.
I know that you're in the same group as me. I just have to say, because you started to answer my next question, what do we need to do in Sweden, EU, and global? And in Sweden, if we start there for sure.
We have very ambitious goals, or relatively ambitious goals in Sweden.
And the goals are?
Well, the 2045,
Yeah.
to be net zero carbon in 2045. And I think we have a good platform there, and we have 7 political parties behind it. But we know very little about how this transformation is going to take place. We have made one important step, and that is the project that the government is supporting, Vattenfall, SSAB, and LKAB. That is very, very positive.
We will hear more about that later also.
To move out of traditional steel making into using hydrogen. So that's very, very positive. But we need so much more. Agriculture, land use is a major issue. And we know now, we have more than 700 scientific reports from all over the world demonstrating that no-till agriculture is a very, very promising alternative. Every time you put the plow in the soil, you release carbon, and you make erosion worse. So we should stop tilling in general. I hear nothing about this in the debate. It's a dead issue. And we have to start looking at land use, not only forests, but the whole system. So implementation in Sweden is the main issue. And there we wrote an article, a few of us in Dagens Nyheter a week ago, where we said, either we need a coalition government, a broad government, to really concentrate on this transition. Or if that is not possible, then we have to do what we did in Miljömålsberedningen, get a group from the major parties together and don't let them out of the room until they have an implementation plan ready. That's what we really need. In the EU, yeah, we have to increase our targets for 2030, of course.
What do you think about our call that we had?
I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But you know, in the EU, it's not easy because we have the Central European countries which are very much questioning this way forward. And there, I think you indicated that traditional refineries can be very useful in the transition. We have to help countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary to make that transition. They are totally dependent on coal in many regions, and we cannot think that away, but we have to help them. And Climate Kick, we have identified that as one of the main issues for the future. How to help regions that are stuck in the coal economy to make this transition and to turn these old plants and installations into something useful. It's not easy, but it can be done.
And right now, EU is thinking on the new targets on climate. Yeah. So it's important to do something right now.
Yeah.
May
I make a comment? Because you asked him very rightly about the Arab world. I was giving a talk in Sharjah, which is one of the Emirates, about a year ago. And I said to them, you have 2 problems in this region with regard to climate change and your tourism. A, you have built your hotels almost in the sea. So that will be a problem because we have sea level rise. And secondly, it will probably be so hot that tourists cannot spend more than 15, 20 minutes on the beach. So this is going to be a challenge for you. And then a lady stood up from the finance minister of Abu Dhabi and she said, Mr. Wikman, we have thought about that. We have built the best shopping malls in the world. So people come here to shop. So I'm not so sure that the Emirates are on the right track yet. But any positive news is good.
On the global level, what do we need to do on the global level?
I don't know right now, because the situation is so confusing. We have to use the UNFCCC, the UN-led process, the best we can, and then we have to complement with bottom-up activities. And I think that when nations don't lead, cities will have to lead, companies will have to lead. And remember, nothing is homogenic. There are very good companies, but there are also very bad companies. There are good cities, there are cities who don't care, etc. So don't generalize and think that consumers or cities or companies will save the world. We have to identify the champions, the leaders, and work with them. And then if you get a critical mass in each community, I think then things will happen. Of course, technology means a lot. Technology means a lot. And solar energy, to me, is a wonderful thing now. And the only thing we have to care about there is to develop and install the equipment so that it can be easily recycled and reused. And I can tell you today it's not happening.
Before we heard that, you said that Nordic companies are progressive. What should companies do to show what kind of progression that have happened here in the Nordics, and how should companies step up in an international context? What do you think?
Well, he referred to IKEA, and they are present all over the world, so people know about them. And when they make a statement, it's disseminated. So I think you have to work on communication. Much more, and maybe make alliances with similar business groups in other parts of the world, so that you have a real strong network. Just to keep on doing. Yeah.
What do you think? You mentioned it almost before. What is the most important thing that EU can do to step up the Nordics companies even more?
Well, I mean, if the EU adopts a more ambitious plan and target for 2030, that will have implications for everybody. Secondly, if the EU continues to reform the emission trading system so that the price continues to go up, that will be a very, very good mechanism or pressure for those companies who have not started to change yet. And then maybe we have to discuss the bioeconomy and what it means, because there is a huge difference between how we look at forests and forest management in the Nordic countries compared to Southern Europe. And that's why whenever we have policy discussions in Brussels about it, it gets very, very tense. So there is still a challenge, I think, because as we have heard, it's ridiculous that we should import 80% of the biofuels. And in particular, then SD for once is true if orangutans are dying because of that. I mean, that's totally unacceptable. So that's another issue at the EU level that is critical, I think. And finally, I think we should be much more proactive with our development cooperation assistance and link it to the EU and really make the focus area investments in sustainable energy for the poor. That has to move up on the agenda. And I'm a member of the board of SIDA, and I know it has not been high on the agenda. It has not.
Thank you, Anders. You will come back in the end. We will have a question for you. But we will give Anders a big applaud right now. Thank you. We'll move on. I think Björn-Ola Linnér is not here. Because I got a text from him saying that he became sick, so he won't be here. So sorry for that. But we're very, very happy to present Katarina Areskog Mascarenas, who is the head of the Commission representation in Sweden. So we're very happy that you're here, and we talked about EU right now, and EU is very important for us. Good morning. So, Katarina, I just have to do like this. No. So, does the EU see that there are benefits for more ambitious targets? That we saw there at the call here, that we're from the Hagainitiativet together with the Climate Leadership Coalition and others. Is there benefits?
Absolutely, and we are...
Working?
Is it working? Yes, yes.
But hold it close.
Okay. I mean, just to do a little bit looking back at what has happened, we all agreed on the 40% target for 2030, and we've now worked through quite a lot of legislation on that, on the climate side and on the energy side. So we have revised the ETS, the emission trading scheme, so that we're now pushing the price on coal upwards. We have the effort sharing on the other sectors outside ETS. We have the LULUCF, the land use change and forestry. So that's fine. It's working for the 40% 2030. Then we have the energy legislation, the renewables, energy efficiency, governance. And there actually we have some good news already, because we have an agreement now on the renewables for 32%, so it's a bit higher than we proposed actually initially. And on the energy efficiency target, we got a deal on 32.5%. And now all the member states are going to put their national plans together for this autumn. Actually, we're asking them to say, how will you implement the climate legislation, the energy legislation? And we see now that it probably will add up to 45% emission reductions for 2030 instead of the 40%. So we see that the ambitions are a bit higher than expected, but there are more to come because we are seeing that to live up to strive for the 1.5 target of the Paris Agreement, we need to be more ambitious, and especially long-term, 2050. It's not enough what we are doing. So right now there's a public consultation out. It started actually in July for what do member states, what do individuals, business organizations think should be the long-term target for the EU 2050. And it's open until the 9th of October. So I really encourage everybody with an interest in this to let us know. It's on our website what we think, because clearly we need to be more ambitious. So the plan is that we should then in November this year, before Katowice, the COP24, we should present this long-term strategy for 2050. And that includes different policy options. Also, one of them that we will look at is to have a emission neutral net emissions neutral strategy by 2050. So there will clearly be ambitious options as well.
What happens if EU don't manage to improve their targets?
Well,
do you think that's an option?
No, I don't think, well, it is, I mean, the end result, we will not, I don't think we will present from the EU Commission. I think we will present very ambitious options. But then, as Anders said, I mean, there are also member states where this is very difficult. So then it comes, of course, to the negotiations. Once we present it in November, we need the negotiations with the member states, with the parliament. And I think there it's extremely important, the next budget we have now. We have proposed a new budget 2021 to 2027, that we really use it to trigger these transitions in coal-dependent member states, so we make it easier for them to agree then on the EU level.
What can countries like the Nordics and some of the companies that are progressive in the EU do to help the countries that Anders mentioned, Poland and Czechoslovakia, to get them more, to help them to do the transition? Can we do anything?
Yeah, I think leading by examples is always, you know, a good way to show that it's possible, but also maybe not do it from a distance, but do it also with an outreach to have this networking. I mean, there are a lot of course, stakeholder events and meetings, you organize them, the outreach, the personal contacts should not be underestimated.
And even for companies to outreach to companies in
that's
their,
what I mean.
Maybe that question is hard for you to answer, but what policy do you want to see in the next years regarding climate?
Well, I think, I mean, we need definitely to look at more ambitious targets. I think that's one. We have the climate legislation. We also have the energy legislation to follow up with that. But I also think Anders also touched upon that. It's also a mindset. We propose this circular economy concept that you always have to look. You don't produce to throw away. You produce to either reuse or recycle. And that we're implementing now when it comes to waste management. We're putting limits how much you can actually put, what is the word, a soup tip, that you can... landfill, thank you. You can put in the landfills. You should reuse it. You shouldn't just put it on the landfill, in the landfill. And we have limits on plastic bags, how many we should use. 2019, we have prohibited plastic material, and also start to mark what kind of plastic is included in a product so you can reuse it. In new plastic products, only 6% are recycled plastic.
Okay.
So you can just, it's a waste, a complete waste. It's economically waste, but of course we use the resources of our planet in a completely mad way. So this circular thinking, I think, is extremely important.
How would you like Nordic businesses to act for bolder climate action? You mentioned lead by example before.
Well, I think innovation is also very important. And we have, as I mentioned, the EU budget. That's, of course, just a drop in the ocean. But we have a good research program, the Horizon 2020, which are now in the new budget going to be devoted very much to climate change. So I think that's another field that's very important, research and innovation.
Lastly, what are your expectations on the summit in California now?
Well, we have our commissioner there, the climate commissioner Hagainitiativet is there, and I know that he's going to propose many exciting new initiatives. And I think it's really important that he's there to support in the climate that we have right now in the US. We need to support those forces that want to advance. So I think that's extremely important that he does that.
Thank you, Katarina. And
thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Big applaud. So, we try to have all kind of perspectives on this issue today. So we have media here, and I also want to bring up Karin from Naturskyddsföreningen. So please, Peter Alestig, who is the editor at Svenska Dagbladet, and Susanna Balchevsky, who is the producer and reporter at Sveriges Radio, and Karin Lexén. You're not media, but you're the Secretary General at Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. So, Peter.
Yes.
Yes. We've been first a comment on what you heard so far from Wael and Kate.
Well, I find it very interesting that there's a kind of a different picture on when it comes to the view of Swedish companies. That we hear such different stories from the US and here in Sweden. And I can only reflect on the issue that you know, we are flooded with Swedish businesses initiative wanting us to write about we're doing this, we're doing that. So it's kind of a challenge to keep up with it, to be honest.
Thank you. And Susanna, is that your picture also?
Yes, kind of. Now I'm not really...
Is this, wait, is this on?
This one instead, if I can borrow it. Yeah, it's about the same picture that I get as Peter said. Yeah.
And Karin, who is from the environmental organization, is your perspective also that business is doing a lot of things in the Nordics?
Yeah, I would agree that businesses are front runners, the Nordic business, many of them at least.
Yeah.
But Sweden is a small country.
Yeah, and we need to be heard all over the world. First, Peter, from your perspective as a journalist, do you think that people have understood the problem with climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. In general, I would say. Then there's also, of course, and this we talk very little about in Sweden, but there is still this clique of climate skeptics out there. And being a journalist, I can tell you that I do get my fair share of emails from those people. And it's difficult to know if they are just a small clique of people screaming very loudly or if they are a tip of a silent iceberg. I don't know if you other guys have any perspective on that.
Susanna, we got a lot of comments from different sides that media started to report about climate very, very recent. They didn't take responsible long time ago. What's your opinion? Because you've been in this.
I know. I feel so old.
You've been around.
Yes, I remember '92 when I met Anders in Rio de Janeiro on the big sustainable development conference there. So I've been around for a while. Well, I wouldn't say that we have been woke up very recent. I think it goes up and down in waves. And I think, I found, since I knew I was going here today, I found a special magazine in Svenska Dagbladet where I used to be for 17 years. It's The Climate Threat. It's from 2007. And also there is this Climate Hope from the same year, 2007. And here we have the message that the technology is there, the knowledge is there, it's just to do it. So I think that there are also situations where there's less interest from the public, and being on a newspaper like Svenska Dagbladet, you have to be very sensitive what people want to read. And I don't think that the editors and the newspaper management always have the same opinion as me as a science and climate reporter have. Maybe they won't let the political team go if it's bad times, or the defense journalist, but maybe the environment journalist is not so important. So it's not so easy if you don't have the platform.
So Peter, because now we're talking about climate in media, do you think it will change? In 1 year, or in winter when it's not so warm, maybe, we don't know yet, maybe it's not an issue for the paper. Will it decline?
Well, at Svenska Dagbladet, we're currently lucky to have a project on the matter. So it won't die down in Svenska Dagbladet for one. But it's like Susanna said, and I think it's interesting that these two newspapers are from 2007. Just after that, you know what happened? There was a financial crisis, and suddenly there were other topics that were on top of people's minds. And we are in a similar situation now with a strong, economic growth in the world, and Sweden is doing good. So I think that the climate has kind of a challenge that people talk about it when there are no other extremely pressing issues. We saw it also in 2015. Just before that, or during 2015, everybody was talking about it with COP21 and everything. And then came the refugee crisis. So it's other more pressing issues keep stealing the attention, kind of.
How should media talk about climate? Because we heard that, we've been hearing before that if we talk about doomsday, there's no future, we will get burned. That makes people not to act. But if you talk about the positive things, the benefits, the co-benefits with reducing, that makes people change and do things. So what is media's role here?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think we should write and report more about the transformation that's ahead of us, but it's difficult if you don't have any role models to show, because the transformation is so big that we are going into. When we're talking about self-driving cars, or if we are talking about fuel for cars or new models of cars, what is the future of the car? Are we going in our own cars in 5 years, 10 years? So what are we planning for? What are we looking ahead for? And of course, that's something I think we should write more about, or report more about, I have to say, since I'm on the radio now. And I think also that technology is very important, and it was I was editor-in-chief for Ny Teknik, a technology weekly newspaper for all the civil engineers, and it was very refreshing just to write about all technology that was interesting, and to realize that Swedish companies are working very hard to get more fuel efficient and really ahead of, in the forefront in the world. So, and these are issues that we are not very used to cover, I think. And we also are a little bit anxious that we will write about something that won't happen later on, and then we will be, you know, kind of fools.
And Peter, do you notice any change in the tonality from business? Have they changed how they talk about climate?
Absolutely. Now again, Susanna has been in the business of covering climate change a lot longer than I have. But during my few years, I started maybe 2013, 2012, something like that. I think I've seen a big shift. You know, now it's not a matter about if you talk about climate change, it's more about how you talk about it. And there's still, to be honest, there's still, you know, the presence of some greenwashing. And for us as journalists, it can be difficult sometimes to, you know, sort that out and see, who's being serious about this. But I think the people who are being serious about it, they are a growing group and the majority, I would say.
So isn't it a problem, greenwashing, green hush? Because if you greenwashing, of course, it's a problem. But green hush, companies being quiet about what they're doing, that's not any inspiration. So what's your take on that, Susanna?
I don't really understand your question.
Green hush, being silent about what they're doing. So if they have a lot of good examples, they don't want to talk about the good examples, because if they talk about they're doing this for climate, but they haven't managed to do anything about that, they will be quiet about what they've been doing on climate, and then you won't hear about any good examples.
Well, it's better to know about things than not knowing, of course. So I think maybe we should try ways to neutralize our relations with companies. Just because what Peter says, we think the same all the time. But you don't want to stand there the week after you report about some good success from a company, and there are new news about the same company that they are polluting, or their CO2 are emissions are much bigger than reported, or something like that. So it's difficult because we don't know if we get the whole story. Their PR people are very nice and tells us a lot of things. So we don't get the whole story. And I also think that one thing, I agree that there are a lot more improvements and a lot more knowledge and a more holistic view from the companies, but still the business model is the same. Produce more stuff, not recycle enough, you know, get on the resources in the world, and try to recycle more and try to lessen the pressure on the resources. We only have one Earth. So I think that's a problem too.
So moving into the circular economy more, and companies changing their business model towards a more circular economy, it would be maybe easier to write about those companies?
For sure, that will be a new track. That will be more, even more fresh, I think.
And Karin, who is at the Secretary General at the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation.
I know, it's hopeless. I need to invent a new name for the English version. Yeah.
Karin, have you noticed any change in tonality from business when you talk about climate?
Yeah, well, I've had different roles going back to the 90s too, so I've seen the big change. I do agree that it's a big shift in tonality and in engagement too, and how you look into the role of our business and how you look into future-looking investments, etc.
You run a very big environmental organization, over 200,000 members. Is the Nordics and Sweden front runners regarding climate?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we have a long history of being front runners, going back to having early legislations, early steering instruments, carbon tax, etc. We're still a front runner when it comes to policy, I would say. I mean, compared to the global level that I've been working on
What's
before.
the single best thing Sweden done on regarding climate?
Well, the recent thing is, of course, the climate policy framework, and that we have
Anders mentioned before.
Yes, we agree that's really important, and that we have goals and targets. Of course, we would love them to be even more progressive, of course, but that has been really important. But then I also agree that we need to have more policy in place too, and we are looking into, for instance, subsidies to fossil fuels. That is important to look into.
So what is the most important to do right for the government? The new government, we don't know what kind of, we had an election in Sweden 2 days ago, so we don't know what kind of government we will have in the future.
It's going to be really exciting, but I think keep on award front runners in different ways, stimulate innovation, keep on looking into the importance of early investments. There's a risky discussion now going on cost efficiency that tend to be a little bit too narrow. So you need to look into cost efficiency in a little broader spectrum. You need to look into the importance of really awarding investments in something that is taking a long time to turn around. So the transformation really need investments now. I think this is really important for policy and for business to continue the good path there. And also, what we are also pushing for, of course, is different incentives, legislations on ended fossil fuel use, both when it comes to investments, also abroad, and when it comes to stop subsidizing fossil fuels in Sweden as well.
We heard about greenwash before, so what is the most important thing you would say that business should do to reduce climate impact or be a part of the transition? Is it innovation or?
I would say that innovation is really important. Another issue that I also like to bring up is to apply a holistic approach. We were also looking, I think Susanna also talked about this transformation and consumption. And there we also need a holistic approach when it comes to the environmental issues. We need to look into climate, but also look into biodiversity, for instance, freshwater use, and so that we don't try to solve one very important challenge with sort of decreasing the possibilities for other very important steps that needs to be taken. And I think the palm oil is one very good example on that we are importing palm oil from very unsustainable use. That is one example on where we're trying to solve the climate issue while destroying the biodiversity.
As Stein from Pre mentioned before, it's a huge problem, 85% import.
So I think to apply a holistic approach and also to have a coherent way of dealing with the 2070 agenda and climate issue, that is also really important.
Susanna?
I just thought of that, Karin, when you said about biological diversity. I'm a little bit concerned that reporting in Sweden is very focused on CO2 emissions from media, because we cannot just get the emissions down and then have a wasted world with no forests, with dead coral reefs. So we really have to grasp over the whole. I think environmental journalism is more, I mean, climate journalism is one thing, and I think that's not enough. You have to be an environmental journalist and really be concerned about biological diversity and all these ecosystems that actually absorb the CO2. We need them. I mean, we are part, we really need them, so we should report more about that.
Peter, you get the last word.
All right. I don't know if this is prepared, but I actually brought one picture that I would love to show.
I don't know if it is here. Yes, probably.
See. Yeah, this is the picture. So the question was, did the media start reporting early enough on climate change? So this newspaper is from 1912 from New Zealand. And it's, some of you have probably seen this, it's circulated some in the social media. So, but I mean, the point is this, that the information has been there for over 100 years, right? And the media has reported for over 100 years.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, you know, to also gain the interest of the public, of the audience. Right now is there. People are talking about the media should have the green pages, kind of like the you know, the pink pages for finance. We should have green pages for climate and environment. Well, if people want to read it, I'm sure it will be, you know. But there's a challenge for us.
Thank you very much, Susanna, Peter, and Karin. An applaud. Oops. So, please, Eva Blixt, Research Manager, Swedish Steel Production Association, Karin Stenmar, Head of Sustainable Folksam Group, Insurance Company, and Ulf Wikström, Head of Sustainability, Stockholm Exergi. That's all Stockholm, eller Fortum Värme, or Fortum Heat. So, we're wrapping up with the most important, I was going to say, business. So what are you doing? And Eva Blixt, you were mentioned before here. You're at the Swedish Steel Production Association, and you're doing something really exciting right now. You're changing the steel business.
Yes, thank you, Nina. Thank you, Nina, for inviting me to come here and speak a little bit about materials that Anders actually mentioned. I will take you through a very quick journey. You said 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I will try to do it in 3 minutes. Maybe it needs a little bit longer time, but I start very quick. 2013, we launched a vision saying steel shapes a better future. And then we have 3 commitments on the top: leading the technology development, attract the most intelligent people to our sector, and have this only products that is societal value. This was 2013, and it was something that we wanted to do, not because anything else is happening. We want to not be the elephant in the room. We want to tell about the benefits of steel instead of just being an emission. So this was started in 2013. It's 5 years now. We have been on this track, changing to have only products for societal values in 2050. It is a long-term vision, and it's only 5 years. During these 5 years, I cannot take you through all what we have done, but we have digged into this. What is societal value? And of course, CO2 is not of societal value, so we have to do something about that. We also have a vision for scenarios. We have an action plan. Meanwhile, UN had the global goals and also the Paris Agreement. And we realized we need to do an action plan for climate change. And we also have this climate roadmap that we did with the fossil fuel. And we also have this Agenda 2030 compass, which is including all of the goals, not only one goal. And I will go back to the thing that Anders was mentioning about the global goals and the material use. If you take people out of poverty to 2030, we need a lot more materials for sure. And this is just to give you a little bit quick why we are transforming steel industry to try to do steel without making any CO2. So we have this today. This is about the material use today. It's 1.5 billion tons steel a year. That's quite a lot. Taking people out of poverty, we will almost double the amount. And why don't we just have circular economy? Why don't only scrap? Because there is not enough scrap in the world to be used. So we need to do both the virgin material route, this blast furnace route, and we need to recycle. And then we, of course, in the end, this is 2000, what do you call that, 2100? Yeah. Maybe. Still, at that point, we need both virgin materials from the iron ore, from the mining, and we need recycling. That's why we need to do this hybrid. We have to change this blast furnace route to another route. Why do we do CO2 in steel industry? Why are we doing this emission? There is two ways of making steel if I focus on the virgin route. So we have this, and I concentrate on the one that we have in Sweden, the SSAB, called a blast furnace. And you have a blast furnace, you put iron ore, and you have to take out the oxygen from there. How do we take out the oxygen? We need coal, and then you have CO2. Okay, that's not really good to continue with that, even though SSAB is the most efficient blast furnace ever. So the new thing is, and it's the same as Preem is talking about, we need a lot of hydrogen. We need a lot of electricity. And if we use hydrogen instead of taking out the oxygen, we have water instead of CO2. And that's for sure societal value. So for me, again, repeating what everyone says, don't optimize in one goal. Think about all the goals. And they are indivisible. So I do agree to Karin saying, don't look at one. I do agree to Anders. We have to take a broad picture. And that's why we need this compass that we have done to be sure that we are investing in the right processes and the right products. That's it.
Thank you, Eva. And Ulf Ekström, Head of Sustainability at Stockholm Exergi.
And if I keep the microphone at my place, then...
Okay, and you have
I can borrow it for a second. Yeah, all right. Let's go local. And welcome to the energy system in Stockholm. Stockholm Exergi is a new name. The name describes what we do. We are using energy in its different forms to optimize the use and minimize their use of resources to supply heat and electricity to society. And I was given 2 minutes totally. I think that this picture in the middle shows the journey that we are on, that we have been on all the time. Some years the climate issue is hot, some years it is not. We still go on, and go on because we believe in science and we believe that we need to do this. We need to combine business with what society needs, and that is affordable and climate neutral energy. So our goal is to reach that by 2030, the latest, and we're on a good way to do that now. For instance, by investing in I think, the world's largest combined heat and power plant here in Stockholm, using biomass, using 90% of the energy content in the biomass and producing electricity, enough electricity that could be, the amount of electricity there could be enough for driving the whole vehicle fleet in Stockholm actually for a year. But instead of letting the steam go away into the air, we use the steam to heat up major parts of Stockholm. That's Exergi use. We are using the energy and the fuel very efficient. Now, what we are on for the future, we have a lot of parallel processes going on. We are looking into production of biochar. We are testing it together with some colleagues in other companies. Producing biochar is very interesting because we can use biomass by pyrolysis and then produce a biochar that, if it's used in the right way, creates a carbon sink. And carbon sink is what I'm coming to know. Maybe that's the next era, the next big thing we can do in my sector to help Sweden to fulfill its 2045 targets, and also, if we can demonstrate this technology in a nice way, also give some boost for it globally. Biochar production will be increased, and then we come to this BECCS, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage. Using bioenergy, coal that's already in a circular system, but instead of letting the CO2 molecules out to the air, we take them down to the ground. And by that create a huge sink. The potential in Stockholm area is around 2 million tons per year. It's cost efficient. If you compare it with many measures that society is undertaking now, this competes very well with them. And our vision is not only climate neutral, but negative. And I think in the future, the heat that you are using will come with a negative emission factor, minus 100 gram per kilowatt hour or so.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to hear. And no, sorry, Karin.
Yes.
You have to have this picture here.
No, I don't have any pictures.
No, but this is you. Almost. Sorry.
Or this is me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
You're the head of sustainability Folksamgruppen.
Yes.
So what are you doing?
Oops, yeah. Yes, thank you for inviting me here. The Folksam Group is actually one of the largest investors, asset managers in Sweden. So we have a great possibility to influence the world around us. So I would say that the most important things for us is to put out a very efficient and very responsible investment strategy. Because we as owners and active owners can influence others. We can also go down the path of green bonds and sustainable bonds, which actually put us in a better position for a green environment and infrastructure that we all are so dependent on. We also have collaboration with others. We work with institutional investors in a program together with SIDA, for example, where we actually share good and best practice within in this field. That's quite unique, I think, in a global context. We also have green label products. We can actually offer our car customers or insurance customers a reduction of 10% if they drive a car that is more with less carbon or fossil dependent and actually more secure. So we can actually find these kind of instruments to move the shift towards a better car fleet in Sweden. We also have the net zero emissions together with the Haga group and the other members here. So I would say that would be the basic best thing or best practice for us in our branch. We're also talking about the circular economy, where we actually claim, where we have our claims in a circular way, where we can reduce our damaged good or our customers' damaged good in a more efficient way. And that will also make an impact on the circular economy way forward.
Could you say the Folksam Group is important for the transition in Sweden?
Of course, in our way, because we have so many, I mean, we have more than 4 million customers in Sweden, and we're into almost every business there is, so we can make a great impact in different levels, especially for our customers, because we're a mutual company.
Eva, the mic. The fossil-free steel production, is that something that the rest of the world can copy?
Yes, it's really important now. I see Katarina has moved, but it's really important that all European steel industries try to transform to this. It's a long-term thing. It's not tomorrow. It takes like 20 years from now. It's a lot of research. So we need a long-term transition period here with the research and funding for that from the industry and from the governments. But yes, it's possible to copy, but we don't know if it's possible to do yet. That's why we have the pilot plant and the other one. And I think it's really necessary to understand that if we are putting a lot of billion of kronas in this, we need a lot of funding from infrastructure, from research, from the governments. And that's why, again, this climate roadmap is really saying we can do that, but you as a government or NGO need to do that. Thank you.
Ulf, you showed all the things you were doing here. It's a lot of things. Is it profitable for Stockholm Exergi to do this?
Of course. We are a company that needs, we need to provide business all the time. And that is also a challenge, of course, that some of those visions I showed on my picture here, they are expensive for a company. So we require then foundings or new instruments on the carbon market in order to be able to roll them out. So in some cases we have conflicts, but in most cases we're just doing what the customers want us to do and we need to do in order not to lose them.
Thank you. An applaud to Anders, Eva and Karin. And Anders, you have to start your microphone. Just have a final question for you. We have this Global Climate Action Summit going on, starting tomorrow. If you would send a signal to policy and business decision makers at GICAS, at the summit in California, what is the most important thing you want to say to them?
I think if I had 3 minutes there, yeah, I would make the point that we live today in a very different world as when the industrial society started to develop. And when the economic framework was established, at that time we had around 1.52 billion people. And nature was still abundant, infinitely large. Now we have almost 8 billion people. I would say the world is full. And we cannot continue to depend on the same policy framework. And I really miss leading economists in this discussion. Why the hell do they talk about inflation, about sovereign debt, about government debt, about all the other parameters in the economy? But this is not really an issue. They continue to talk about external effects as if this was something marginal. So I would really impress on the meeting that, yes, good with all disruptive technologies. Yes, we know that solar energy will dominate in 30 to 40 years, but the transition is very, very difficult to make. But please let us reform the economic framework, because otherwise I fail to understand how this is going to work. Because the combination of the rebound effect, when we use things more efficiently, and continued conventional growth, will kill all the good initiatives unless we develop a framework where we really give priority to quality and not quantity. And that's the only way out. So that is my message. It's probably different than what you had thought.
No. Think, Anders, an applaud to Anders. And I took 4 minutes extra of your life. Sorry for that. Thank you all the people looking at this at the webinar, and thank you for you being here this early morning. And good luck at the Global Climate Action Summit from the Hagainitiative. Thank you.